So during my backswing, if you could walk me through what happens with the lead arm rotation.
Definitely. So let's say in an online swing, right? Just a neutral swing, okay? One thing that we're gonna see players do is they're gonna move their left arm across their chest a little bit, they're gonna have a little bit of turn, and then we would see little to no or very slight, right? We'll just keep it at little, form rotation of the lead arm in the backswing. And the way I would point this out to students is using the logo on the glove as a reference. So at this point, I would prefer students either have the logo slightly down towards the ground, okay, or maybe just a little bit out in front of them. Certainly what we don't want to see is we don't want to see too much lead form pronation or rotation where that logo on the glove is pointing up to the sky by about shaft level to the ground.
Logo up bad, logo away down good.
Better, yes.
Okay. Hey guys, so we're super excited to announce that for the month of April, from today through April 30th, we're gonna be doing a 30-day money-back guarantee. That means if you haven't tried out CogornoGolf.com, now is the time to do it completely risk-free. If you try it out and don't like it for any reason, simply send us a message. We'll send you every single penny you invested right back, no questions asked. CogornoGolf.com is where you can send in your swing so we can see what you're actually doing, help identify priorities, tell you specifically which drills to do, how many reps to do, how many days per week. It's an awesome practice plan you're gonna get. We're there to guide you through the entire process. There's coaches there 24/7, answer any questions you have, talk you through the feels, what to expect, how to work on things. It's awesome. I really think it's equally as effective, if not more effective, than in-person coaching. You're gonna absolutely love it. Again, April 8th through April 30th, 30-day money-back guarantee. Would love to see you there. Hey guys, Eric here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about left arm or lead arm rotation in the golf swing. Some specifics, some checkpoints, what to do if you fall on either side of the checkpoint, really why it's so important for a lot of parts of your swing. To my left, Mr. TJ Yeaton. TJ, thanks for having us out, man.
Thanks for being out.
Appreciate it. TJ's Golf Digest Best Young Teacher, Best in State. He was the teacher year back in Indiana. Someone who has a really strong grip on the golf swing and all things golf coaching. So we're in for a treat today. We're going to talk lead arm. I guess we'll say lead arm because you're a lefty, right? So I don't want to, we'll say left arm, lead arm rotation. So TJ, my lead arm in the swing, right? I'm not going to make a swing where there's no rotation.
Correct.
Right? Can we start with that as a starting point? I'm not going to make a swing where my arm just moves in space back and through with absolutely zero rotation.
Right.
There's going to be some amount of pronation, palm down. There's going to be some amount of supination, palm up. Can we establish that as facts?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, all right, that's the video. Your arm's going to rotate. See you later. So if the arm's going to rotate, my lead arm's going to rotate. And of course we have, there's shoulder rotation involved in that. And then there's more forearm rotation. But my arm's going to rotate. Now, managing how much my arm rotates on the way back and through, controls a couple of variables. I think one big one that I'd like to talk about today is, we'll say the plane that the club moves on during the backswing and downswing, and then maybe some common issues that we see. But why don't we start off with like a 101?
Yeah.
Right? Like, hey, if we were to make this stock model golf swing, how much does my arm rotate during the backswing? How much in transition, how much in the downswing follow through? Can we do just like a generic version?
Try.
Okay, we'll do our best. So let's say I take my setup position.
Yep.
Now, let's assume for this beginning part that I have a neutral left hand attachment.
Sure.
Right? Which we can dive into a little, I think how the grip affects that. But
Definitely.
let's say I have a neutral lead arm. Let's say everything is just like stock perfect. So during my backswing, if you could walk me through what happens with the lead arm rotation.
Definitely. So let's say in an online swing, right? Just a neutral swing, okay? One thing that we're going to see players do is they're going to move their left arm across their chest a little bit. They're going to have a little bit of turn. And then we would see little to no or very slight, right? We'll just keep it at little, form rotation of the lead arm in the backswing. And the way I would point this out to students is using the logo on the glove as a reference. So at this point, I would prefer students either have the logo slightly down towards the ground, okay, or maybe just a little bit out in front of them. Certainly what we don't want to see is we don't want to see too much lead form pronation or rotation where that logo on the glove is pointing up to the sky by about shaft level to the ground.
Logo up bad, logo away down good.
Better, yes.
Okay. Now as I go from here to the top,
Yep.
same sort of feels. How much rotation from here?
So as we move to, let's say, left arm level to the ground, Again, I would prefer students not have a lot, we'll have some, but not a lot of pronation, right? So that lead arm rotation that way. So at this point, what I would suggest to students they feel is as if this logo on the glove was going to face a camera behind them, okay? Again, as opposed to being up to the sky at that point.
Got it.
Okay.
And then as I go from here, so obviously the logo up is always going to get my shaft play more horizontal or flat, right,
Correct.
during the backswing.
Yeah.
If I were to have that logo more away, let's even just say I was pointing straight away from me,
Sure.
right? That would get the shaft angle more vertical, relatively speaking.
Correct.
Okay. Let's say as I do this, I'm on a neutral-ish angle. And would you say as like another reference point as someone does this, if they can use the butt of the club ball line reference?
Absolutely, yeah.
To help with that?
So I would prefer, a preference would be either at or slightly inside of the ball line.
And we're talking like this ball target line
Correct.
that sits down there. Yeah, okay. So the butt of the club points at that, and then like, you know, just as a scale for someone who's maybe watching this, if I go too much logo up, that butt of the club will point too far outside, potentially a problem because it's going to steepen later. And then, you know, most players maybe we would prefer on the ball target line, maybe even slightly inside of that. That has something to do with lead arm depth, but anyway, I'm getting off track. Let's say lead ball target line. Now, as I go up to the top, is it kind of maintaining the same thing?
This is where, in my experience, this is where we'd see most students at the club level start to add the most rotation in a positive way. Okay, so normally what would happen is that student would start to go the other way. They'd max out that lead rotation too soon and then end up kicking the club more up and around over the head as opposed to pitching back behind him.
Got it. So from here, let's say from here during my takeaway, pretty neutral. This is the part where like I repeat everything.
Sure.
The logo's like away or slightly down, maybe grip dependent.
Yep.
And then as I go from here, the logo's still kind of more straight away, right?
Yep.
It's not too far up towards the sky, would be the flat version. And then from here to the top, there's going to be an increase in pronation from here up to the top.
Yes.
So have the shaft.
This is the point where we'd start to say, okay, let's get that logo of the glove more up to the sky at that point.
Got it. And why from takeaway to top specifically? Like why would I want to do that instead of going here, you know?
Yeah, good question. Okay,
Yeah.
so this lead arm, right, all of our joints, we have a specific range of motion that they can move, right? So if we overdo one of those motions too much too soon, we can't go any farther later, so we end up getting out of that motion, right? So for a lot of players that I'll coach, especially at the club, we'll kind of max out how much lead arm rotation they'll have very early, and they can't continue that over the course of the backswing, so what they'll end up doing is very late in that backswing, they'll start to go the other way.
And that's such a, I think, big point too, and why I think the checkpoints are so useful, because a lot of times they'd be like, well, how much should I rotate? And it's like, well, you're kind of going from 0 to 100 gradually, generally speaking, throughout. Why not just do this or this? Because of end range of motion. Yeah. When you go so far in one way with the shaft, wrist, whatever really you're talking about, generally speaking, you're going to start to see a compensation in the opposite motion earlier than perhaps you want to see it.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? So I think that's beautiful. So I'm neutral here.
Yep.
Right. I'm still neutral here, and then from here to the top, there's going to be a little bit more of the logo up towards the sky.
Correct.
Right. And that little bit of logo up towards the sky there now, as I start my transition, right? Is that a continuation of kind of keeping the same, maintaining? Like I'm not going supination from there right away, right?
Yeah. So what we would see in better players is as their torso begins to turn against their left arm, if we get the club situated correctly and we get the forearm rotation correctly, we'll see this little change in direction in the shaft happen organically, right? Yeah. And the player's not highly conscious of this. They may or may not be aware of this. They may or may not feel that. But if we kind of get the club lined up and we get these segments and joints lined up right at the top, we'll get that for free.
So neutral, a little bit of late pronation, say a little bit more in transition as a byproduct of other movements.
Correct.
Now, as I start to go from here, right, let's say there's a pronation to here, and let's say I'm neutral, and at some point in time, I have to start to work into supination. Mm-hmm. And would that be kind of roughly lead arm parallel through?
We'd see it be different for what your intention is as a player.
Yeah.
My preference for players that are working more towards, let's say, a draw pattern would be somewhere around shaft level to the ground or just below. We'll start to see that start to move into supination. So that's where that logo on that glove would start to kind of twist outward towards the ball.
Got it.
Logo more down towards the ground.
So I'm going neutral, and again, this is like all stock stuff, right? I'm going neutral, neutral, a little bit of pronation, a little bit more pronation, natural.
Yep.
Let's sort of say I'm sort of still in that phase until here-ish.
Yep.
And then from there is where that, you know, this is really good visual too. We can put B-roll up of when you watch a lot of players, and we talk supination, how much. I'm like, well, depends on other factors. When you look at them, let's say a logo of the glove points back away again, right, at here. And then it points, let's say it points straight behind them by the time the shaft's parallel on the other side. Right. So there's this supination happening really mostly from here to here.
Sure.
Right, as a primary. Is that fair?
Yeah, in a good swing.
In a good swing, that's right. So let's say that's like stock model.
Yep.
Now let's say common issues that we would see.
Yeah.
I think one of the things we both see a lot would be excessive pronation early.
Right away.
Start with that.
Yep.
So if I'm a player who, again, let's assume no other faults, has too much palm down, logo up early, you know, one of our common themes here, like a tagline, if you will, is like, you almost always fix a problem by doing the opposite and exaggerating, right?
Sure.
For almost everything.
Yep.
Is that how you would handle that early? So like instead of me going palm down, you go a little more palm up, raise the shaft angle?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that fair? So instead of me going here and I'm going palm down inside, which is funny, a lot of those players then you see the across the line, but I don't think they know that pattern goes together. I would feel a little bit more, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel a little bit more like palm towards the sky feel.
Definitely.
Shaft more vertical. And I see that a lot with those players. You know, a lot of times shoulders getting level.
Right.
The player that has excessive pronation, hips kicking in. But let's say we're just focused on the arm piece and you're trying to fix this. Palm up, the shaft would almost even feel like it's like butt of the club to the ground.
Sure.
Right, almost straight. Even in some like excessive things, you might even want to feel like it tips this way a little.
Yeah, like a Matthew Wolf.
Like a Matthew Wolf, super exaggerated. And then obviously they'd be recording from down the line.
Right.
And then be like, wow, I feel stupid
Yes.
with how vertical this is.
Yep.
And if I'm the player pronates early, it's perfect.
It's going to be online. Yep.
And you're kind of like finding that level of exaggeration you need, right? When you're doing video feedback.
Yeah, and for the player, it's almost an equal and opposite amounts, right? So if you're a player that rotates too much too early, you're going to feel the most in the other direction just to find some middle ground.
Just to find middle. So that's a big one, right? So if we kind of work under that same theme, so the player who maybe goes in early and then across, would you have them feeling a little more palm up and then logo up?
Absolutely.
Kind of phase it like two phase.
Yeah, break it up into two parts.
Yeah.
Shaft level and then top.
Okay, so they would go palm up, shaft more vertical early, and then somewhere maybe like halfway back-ish, start to feel like they're adding the pronation piece. And then it's funny for those players, they probably have to feel like the shaft's dead vertical and then like dead horizontal.
Right.
Yeah. So that a lot of times can be a shift. But that's where, like, guys, it's so key that you use video feedback then. Because you literally, your swing could go from here to here, and it feels like that, right, in motion.
Absolutely,
See it all the time. So that's where the key of, like, him and I having experience standing on a tee and just doing it a lot, we can, like, you know, go through that faster, but you have to use the video feedback to be able to see that. Anything else, CJ, in terms of like big major faults? I think the pronation's a big one, right?
Yeah.
Anything else in terms of top of backswing transition, anything like that?
Well, can we talk about the takeaway for a moment?
We can do whatever we want.
Okay, so we'll go back to the takeaway for a second.
Yeah.
So kind of within that takeaway piece, right, we get into the wrist just a little bit, right? At this point, one thing that I'm stressing to students is we need to have a little bit of wrist hinge, right? We need to get the club head to ascend a little bit. A lot of times what we'll see students do, and again, they might even do this as an attempt to get the shaft less across the line at the top, is they'll just kick it in really early.
Yeah.
They'll start to move that left wrist into flexion, this right wrist massively into extension, and then even maybe a little uncocked.
Yeah.
And then again, we run into that same issue, late backswing, right? We've got to start to get out of those pieces, and then we go right back over
All
the
day.
top. Yeah. So that's a big one for me. I see a lot.
And so if someone plays, if someone really works to get neutral here, and when we say amount of wrist hinge, right, in terms of like the shaft's parallel to the ground by X, like how does someone know if they have enough wrist hinge?
Yeah, good question. So what I would do, go ahead and go back to address for a second. Whatever height the butt of the club is at address,
Yeah.
I'd want it to be at that same height by shaft level to the ground.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
Yep.
if we just took a line and we draw that line, right, that shaft would be level at the same height that it started at the butt of the club.
This would be unhinged.
Correct.
Shaft's not level when
Yep.
the butt of the club is the same height.
Yeah.
What
We could
a
also,
beautiful checkpoint.
right, we could also do this, right? We could see that shaft be level. So let's say here's the butt of the club, right, just above your knees.
Yep.
We'll see a lot of players get that shaft level to the ground, but now it's above their belt.
Got it. And that goes in with the unhinging.
Correct.
Got it. So that's so good. So when you guys are watching that from face on, right, and down the line, the level of the hands of the butt of the club when they start. There's another one, man, where I feel like we can go an hour on this, but let's just do a little bit on grip styles with this. So again, we're kind of focusing on arm rotation the best we can, but there's so many micro variables. If I have a stronger grip, so let's say like my lead hand placement, turn more clockwise, maybe where my heel pad's at versus a weaker attachment. Anything to look for, think about with that relative to arm rotation?
Yeah, so what we have to understand is in that grip type, that form is already pre-turned.
Yes.
Okay, so we're not going to have number one, more form rotation, right? And this is where this grip becomes challenging for a lot of players is they're already pre-turned and then they're adding more rotation.
Got it.
Okay, the second thing to know about this grip.
So it's like, my arm here is it's in pronation, it's set up already. Yeah.
So it'd be really easy to go any more than that, and now the club starts to go too far to the inside.
So when you see like a player with a really strong grip a lot of times, and they're preset, so like, man, you're so preset pronated, and then they're like, well, why is the club inside my hands? Well, you already have a gazillion degrees to start with.
Right. Got a head start.
Okay.
Yep. The second thing we're looking at, let's say with that turned lead hand to the top of the golf club, is the amount of wrist bend.
Yeah.
Okay, so players that have stronger or more turned lead hand grips, we're going to see them have more bend backwards in that lead wrist.
Yep.
So if we go from address to shaft level to the ground, one thing I would have students look for with strong grips is when they look at shaft level to the ground that they have about the same amount of bend in that left wrist that they had when they began.
Perfect. So if I'm someone who's weaker, say I'm more like Jordan Spieth, left hand grip on the side, lead hand grip over here, for me to have that same alignment would be more logo down.
Yes.
And
a little bit of flexion.
A little bit of flexion.
That becomes your wrist hinge.
Yeah.
That's a challenging grip because when my lead hand goes more underneath the golf club, I lose the ability to go radial.
Yeah, would not advise that.
That would be my least preferred grip.
Yeah.
Especially for club players.
Yeah, please don't have heel pad on the side of the club way over, unless you're hitting it really good already. So perfect. So the stronger grip I have like this, so roughly speaking, keep the same amount of bend at my takeaway position that I had it set up, regardless of grip type.
Definitely.
It's a stock model. This is turned into a takeaway video, but I love every second of it. The butt of the club stays the same by the time the club is parallel to the ground. That's how much hinge I have. And then I'm using the ball target line as a reference for arm rotation, how much my logo points up versus down or straight away. I think that's really good. And then in transition, right, I'm not going to palm up supination right away.
Correct.
I'm keeping the pronation that I have. There'll be a little bit more in there from the body motions. If I don't get the body motions correct, in the beginning, are you okay if someone sort of manually adds some of that?
So we'll see players do this in different ways, right? There's a million ways to shallow the shaft, right? Players can do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
It just becomes a little player dependent. Some players need to actively try to rotate the golf club more shallow, right, or flatter.
Yeah.
Some players it's going to happen organically just from how they line it up and how they move in transition. But yeah, so some players might need to be more active.
But I think the general idea is like, if you get the backswing pieces good and learn the transition moves, ideally you shouldn't have to really do so much of that. Right. Obviously there's going to be a guy who's like wild, right, who needs to really exaggerate. But there comes the late pronation. Like a lot of those guys, if you set up the pieces earlier, right, the transition, they don't have to exaggerate that so much. So, all right, again, so much more to dive into, but I think that's pretty good in terms of lead arm. I think those checkpoints, I think that's pretty good. The grip motions and how that affects it. I also just think the last thing, I promise, is the grip pattern. So like if I have a really, let's say I have an excessively strong grip, pre-turn, lots of extension here. Yep. As I were in terms of arm rotation, that player, generally speaking, if all else is equal, is going to have a face that's a little more closed. And so as they come down, all golfers need supination.
Some degree, right?
Yeah. But like, if you got the face tilted down here and you're like a Dustin Johnson, Victor Hovland, Zach Johnson, they're not going to have as much arm rotation.
Correct.
But it's not as though they have zero.
Correct. Everybody has some amount.
Some arm rotation.
Some may feel less, right? You get into their fields, they might describe, doing some or not at all. But everybody is going to have some amount of lead arm supination through the ball.
Yeah. Weaker grip pattern.
High, much more.
Higher, maybe more bow, more flex.
Yep.
Now, you also see players at the top, like a Spieth, a John Rahm, right, who has weak grip attachment, because the argument there is like, well, potentially more timing, et cetera. Well, yeah, I don't know. Like those
timing in every swing.
Right? Exactly, right. You can't like take the timing out by not having any arm rotation. Okay. All right. I think that's good. Arm rotation. Thank you. That was beautiful. Guys, again, a lot more to talk about here. I'm going to link another video where we talk some more supination, in particular in terms of the arm rotation during the downswing, the timing, more on how the grip's dependent. Like we could keep going on and on about that, but there'll be more there. We're also going to link CogornoGolf.com. Would love to work with you there.